You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. For the conversation today, we're joined by one of the generous-hearted, courageous medical professionals who has found herself on the front lines in a New York hospital war zone, treating patients who are gravely ill, flooding in with COVID-19. In the midst of trauma, pain, and loss, her skills as a doctor and her resilience as a human being have even made it possible to find or forge moments of triumph and celebration. She's going to talk about that. And to be sure, there'll be Surrealism Corner and, of course, Fighting Words at the end of the program. So we better get going, which means right now, going inside the headlines. Here are some facts and statistics to fling at friends or relatives still in denial about the severity of this pandemic. You know, people who, like the Trump regime, think that all of this will miraculously be over soon and that life will return to what was erroneously once called normal. A consortium of universities in Brazil have projected that that country's actual number of coronavirus cases is 12 times the current reported figure. The pandemic is confronting some of the world's poorest nations with economic disaster. Income losses in the developing world are expected to exceed $220 billion, according to the United Nations, and nearly half of all jobs on the African continent could be lost. While wealthy European governments can pay furloughed workers the majority, at least, of their salaries, and while millions of Americans who lose their jobs do have access to unemployment benefits, although it must be admitted only for a while and only for certain kinds of workers, still, billions of people in Africa, South Asia, and parts of Latin America and the Caribbean work in the informal economy, with little or no social safety net. Ironically, though expectably, as governments have responded or failed to respond to the virus, so also have armed insurgents, terrorist groups, drug cartels, and gangs, a parallel underworld of public health policy. That's what they've transformed themselves into. In Afghanistan, the Taliban has sent health teams to far-flung provinces. In Mexico, drug cartels are offering aid packages to people reeling under economic avalanches. In Brazil and El Salvador, gangs are enforcing curfews to prevent the spread of the virus. Nor is this the first time such groups have tried to fill the role of government. That's how Hamas gained trust and then power among Palestinians in the Gaza Strip and in other territories occupied by Israel. Hamas established sanitation systems, garbage pickup, plumbing installation, and so forth. Still, few crises have tested the limits of the world's nation-states as this one is doing, providing an opening for armed insurgent groups to step in precisely where presidents, police forces, and parliaments have failed abysmally. Following up on our report last week about just who essential workers really are, they're women of all ethnicities, plus black and brown men, here are some numerical breakdowns. Women comprise 52% of all essential workers. 78% of social workers, 77% of healthcare workers, 53% of critical retail workers. Nearly 9 out of 10 nurses and nursing assistants are female, as are a majority of pharmacists and an overwhelming majority of pharmacy aides and technicians. More than 2/3 of the workers at grocery store checkout counters and fast food counters are women. By the way, as an aside, while 54% of men still have wives to care for them at age 85 and beyond. Only 16% of women that age have husbands. And among those essential workers, let's not forget that of the 3.5 million truck drivers in the United States, more than 200,000 of them are women, keeping us fed and well-stocked. They drive largely without protective equipment, being unable to easily find masks or disinfecting supplies to wipe down the huge trucks. Some large trucking companies provide supplies to their personnel, but many truckers have to fend for themselves. And, as we reported previously on this program, many of the women truckers find they have to drive with their small children, for whom truck lingo is ankle biters, in the cabin with them on long hauls. Given the above statistics, I must admit it makes me angry to hear some people complain about going stir-crazy because of lockdown and social distancing. Come on, folks. Being homebound and able to social distance, those are actually privileges. You cannot shelter in place if you have no place in which to shelter. And if you must share limited living space with 4 or 5 or more people, social distancing is a bitter joke. Nor can you complain about having to work from home when the least paid, yet now considered most essential workers, cannot do that. The Economic Policy Institute has noted that less than 1 in 5 African American workers and approximately 1 in 6 Latinx workers are able to work from home. So now, finally, we begin to see just who embodies essential. The essential worker is, by considerable majority, a woman. She has an olive or darker complexion. She is bilingual. She's likely a mom, possibly a single mom. Maybe her kids are dreamers. Maybe her husband contracted the virus and she has to care for him and the kids too, desperately trying to keep everybody separate in different corners not that far from each other. She's exhausted, but she still shows up for work. Bob Herbert, the New York Times columnist, wisely pointed out, apropos of this viral inequity, that, quote, the idea that this virus is an equal opportunity killer must itself be killed, period, close quote. He's quite right, of course, and his saying so reminded me of a great sardonic quote by Anatole France in 1894. Here it is. Quote, the law, in its majestic equality, forbids the rich as well as the poor to sleep under bridges, to beg in the streets, and to steal bread. Period. Close quote. We have to take a short break here, but there's lots more coming up, including fighting words and that interview with a doctor on the front lines fighting COVID-19. But before we do any of that, we have to go into the, as if we'd ever left it, Surrealism Corner. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Subreal, super real, unreal, surreal. Who can tell the difference anymore? This must be the something corner. The Georgia Republican governor wins the gubernatorial idiot award of all time for deciding to open the state without consulting the mayors and with none of the prerequisites in place, and especially to focus on opening tattoo shops, barber shops, beauty parlors, and nail sculpting salons. Isn't that great? He assures the state that everybody is going to observe social distancing and keep a space of 6 feet apart. He must have somehow employed the fictional character of Edward Scissorhands for the barber shops, and I can't wait to learn what he's doing on the other fronts. Oh, poor Georgia. You had a chance to have Stacey Abrams as your governor, but because of voter suppression, you got this. San Francisco is considering marking the sidewalks at 6 feet intervals to clarify, for the sake of the homeless people, where each one should safely huddle. That is one of the most bizarre things I think I have ever heard. At all. Ever. Here's a nice little respite from COVID-19. Smugglers sawed into Trump's border wall 18 times in 1 month in the San Diego area. The breaches and the attempted breaches of the steel bollards on the U.S.-Mexico border in California all took place between September 27th and October 27th, according to U.S. Customs and Border Protection data obtained by the Washington Post via the Freedom of Information Act. Smugglers have been using common household tools to cut the metal structure so that migrants and drug shipments can be pushed through the wall. But back to the overarching surrealism of C-19. Now, did you know there was something called a virosphere? That's the name scientists sometimes use for the world of virus diversity, which is vast. There are millions, even trillions of species waiting to be found, and we've sampled only a minuscule fraction. Even so, researchers have uncovered hundreds of thousands of new species that have yet to be named. It was in the late 1800s when viruses were discovered, and soon were recognized as causing different diseases like rabies and influenza, for example. Virology as a specialty was born, and after decades of growing viruses in labs and learning to recognize them with all their subtle different features and naming them, we have, as of now, 6,828 officially named species of viruses, as opposed, say, to entomologists having named 380,000 species of beetles alone. But the field of virology has intensified with computer programming that can recognize viral genes. For instance, in 2016, Ohio State University virologist Matthew Sullivan used computer analyses to detect and report over 15,000 viruses in seawater, each representing a new species. That was more than twice as many species as all the previous identified viruses, but Sullivan and his colleagues continued in their work, and by 2019 they reported finding a total of 200,000 species. The current novel coronavirus that causes COVID-19 is apparently a species relative of SARS. SARS, S-A-R-S, is shorthand for Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome, and it's the one that caused the outbreak in 2002. The virus that causes SARS is officially known as SARS-CoV. So they have now officially named the COVID-19 causing virus, this one we're suffering from now, SARS-CoV-2. Virologists believe that as yet undiscovered viruses infecting animals, plants, fungi, and protozoans, a group called eukaryotes, number 100 million species. Bacteria and other single-celled microbes belong to a group called prokaryotes, and some microbiologists argue that there are, at minimum, 100 million species of viruses that infect prokaryotes, while others argue that the true figure might be as high as 10 trillion. Studies of animals and plants rely on the classification established in the 1700s by Carl Linnaeus. We humans are in the class of mammals, for instance, and that itself is part of the animal kingdom. But viruses present a problem for classification. This is because they have a talent for trading genes with other species, making it hard to draw lines between groups of them. There are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy, Horatio. But here's a note on a cousin of ours in the mammal class of the animal kingdom. 25 years ago, 14 wolves from Canada were released into the rugged wilds and pine forests of Yellowstone National Park. It was an experiment. Wolves had been erased from the park and the rest of the northern Rockies in a campaign of shooting, poisoning, and trapping in the early 20th century. Ranchers, fearful for their livestock, and hunters, very possessive about their quarry, regarded the wolves as vermin. But wolves are in fact central to maintain the park's ecological balance. Yellowstone Northern Range is known as the Serengeti of North America because of its profusion of wildlife, but without the wolves, elk had proliferated, gobbling up everything green that grew. Now, with more wolves introduced and also breeding, the wolf population numbers about 1,500 in Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming, with maybe 350 to 400 in and around Yellowstone. This means, among other things, that wolves can be studied in ways never before possible, revealing, for example, that wolf packs previously thought to be led by alpha males are actually matriarchies, and that individual wolves have distinct personalities. There is also pack respect for decision-making done by older female wolves, and there is individual and group grief when a wolf dies, a particular kind of howling. In other words, wolves, like elephants, mourn their dead. Meanwhile, the elk are now wary of roaming just any old where they like and eating whatever they like. So, such trees as willow and aspen and cottonwood have had a growth surge, which in turn benefits beavers, grizzly bears, songbirds, and lots of other wildlife. So, although these days Yellowstone is closed to human visitors because of one form of life out of balance, the virus, someday you might be able to go back to the great park again and spy a pack wolf leader at a distance, maybe as she watches from a high ridge, surveying what again is her terrain. And that won't even be surreal. It's time for another short break before the conversation. You know, we've heard from the heroic nurses, some of them anyway, who are on the front lines, and the vast majority of nurses are female. The vast majority of doctors are not yet female, and in particular, women drop off the measuring scale when it comes to specialists. But what if you're a highly trained specialist, and still you step up at danger to yourself and to your family to be in the front lines fighting COVID-19, and even find some moments of joy in that? Well, that's our guest for today, and it's coming right up. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
My guest for today's conversation is Dr. Vafa Tabatabaie, an amazing woman who, although highly skilled and a specialist, became a frontline worker in the battle against COVID-19. She received her medical degree from Shahid Beheshti Medical University in Tehran, Iran, where she was born, and after several years of research on thyroid cancer in Toronto, she came to Montefiore Hospital in New York City in 2007, and she was a researcher in the Division of Endocrinology. She graduated from the Internal Medicine Residency Program in 2011, during which her teaching skills were recognized with the Award for Outstanding House Officer in Internal Medicine. And she completed the Endocrinology Fellowship Program in 2013 and joined the Einstein Montefiore Division of Endocrinology faculty later that year. She's the Program Director for Endocrine Fellowship at Montefiore Medical Center, Albert Einstein College of Medicine, and she's also the Director of Fracture Liaison Services, a multidisciplinary team of endocrinologists, geriatricians, and orthopedic surgeons. During the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic, Montefiore Medical Center became one of the designated COVID centers in New York City, while also running clinical trials for potential therapies. And she has been there, and still is. Dr. Vafa Tabatabaie. Vafa, Dr. Tabatabaie, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's an honor to have you here. You are normally an endocrine specialist and the program director for Endocrine Fellowship at Montefiore, but Montefiore is one of the COVID-19 treatment centers, and I know that you've been in the thick of it. Just start by giving us an idea of what you've been through, even though it supposedly is flattening the curve slightly now.
Yes. So it was about maybe about 5-6 weeks ago by now that we all knew that it's going to hit us hard in New York in general. But as you know, one of the first clusters of COVID-19 was in Westchester area, which is very close to us. So we started mentally preparing ourselves. Our hospital leadership started making preparations. We knew that we had to expand our capacity for inpatient admissions, and that meant that we also need to ask physicians who normally don't function in the hospital, like myself, to come in and join the inpatient team. So say, for example, and I'm just giving these numbers as an example, that say if on a regular day there are like 10 medicine teams taking care of patients in the hospital, they had to expand it to like 20.
Wow.
Which meant having doctors that regularly fill other responsibilities come in and do inpatient internal medicine.
Yes.
Specialists like myself in internal medicine, and also it meant going outside of internal medicine, which we have started to call our allied specialists. So, for example, orthopedic doctors or ophthalmologists, or and any MD essentially was called, and we all knew that it's essentially all hands on deck.
Wow! And when it actually hit the full force of it, is it at all describable?
It's very difficult to describe. One of the definitions that is closest to reality, I heard it from our CEO on an interview. It literally feels like working in a war zone, and it really needed a lot of adaptation on everybody's part to doing things that you haven't done in a while, you don't like doing, you went into this and that specially in order not to do it. You just had to go back to taking on all of those responsibilities all over again.
Yeah. The danger rate itself to medical personnel is frightening, and the lack of PPE and the lack of support governmental support, even though here in New York there's been as much support as possible, relative to other states. But still, the response from the federal government has been so despair-provoking and outrage-provoking that I cannot articulate it. I'm sure you can't either. It's like sending people into the war zone, without any ammunition, just
Yep.
to be sitting ducks. Are you experiencing any of the so-called flattening of the curve now?
Yes, I am very cautiously optimistic. I am going to say yes to that, at least for now. So one of the things that started happening in our hospital, essentially every little corner of the hospital that served whatever purpose was transformed into a patient care unit.
Right.
So, for example, they ripped apart our conference center and turned it into patient care centers within a few days.
Sure.
So I see that some of these aren't being used so much anymore. So we don't need that, the extremely high capacity that we created.
Right.
It looks like we're not needing that full capacity at this time. And also another good sign is that the number of patients who come into our emergency rooms have also gone down.
I'm just so terrified that the minute people hear that, they will think, okay, that's done. Dust your hands off. We can go back to normal now. And normal will not return for a very long time, if ever. As we see happening now in the crazy southern states where they've just decided, well, that's it. We're not going to social distance anymore. We need to get back to work. It's a matter of values. Do you value life or do you value business? And it's a clear divide on who values what. But if you're medical personnel, you don't, in a sense, have that choice, because they're when people violate the lockdown or social distancing or just shrug it off or don't take it seriously, you're the ones who still have to treat them.
Yeah, that's right. And to be honest, that's one of my constant worries as well. I have to say that my personal experience, and I acknowledge that it's very limited, is that on the days that I'm not on inpatient medicine floor, I'm still an endocrinologist, and I do telephone visits with my patients. So everybody that I call is home. So it looks like at least folks in the Bronx are taking this seriously, and I'm really, really proud of my patients.
Yes. Well, folks in New York are taking it. Folks in many states are. It's
right.
And in fact, the real folks may still be taking it seriously in Georgia and the Carolinas and Texas and those other places. The governors who are blithely saying, we'll practice social distancing in barbershops and nail salons and massage parlors. My God. I mean, it just boggles the mind. It really does. Take a momentary departure from the Bronx, which, listeners, in case you do not know, is a borough of New York City, and it's where Montefiore Hospital is located. But take a detour and back to your country of origin. I know you're a U.S. citizen and an Iranian American, but you were born and educated in Iran, where there are, believe it or not, world, a lot of underground feminists and some just dynamite women, fantastic women. But we know that, like any theocracy, and any non-functioning democracy, that the government lies, just as it lies from Washington, D.C. these days. And we know that Iran said it was all under control, and the world didn't know otherwise until there were aerial shots of just frighteningly enormous mass graves. Yep. What are you hearing, if anything, from friends or family or any contacts you still have in the country that you were born in?
Yeah, I do still have family members there. My mom is there. She's been home for maybe the past 6 weeks. Also, a lot of my friends, high school friends, medical school friends, are still in Iran, and yeah, it is a pretty scary situation, especially because, as you pointed out, lack of information or erroneous and misleading information can definitely into that this pandemic and lead to more disease and more death. Yeah. I definitely think that the numbers are way higher than what they announced. And unfortunately, same mistake, in my opinion. There is some opening of businesses. Some of my friends who were working from home for several weeks are now going back to work. Mm-hmm. I think soon maybe even they will open schools. I think there's definitely going to be a second wave. And I think that applies to everywhere. If people don't take it seriously, there's going to be a second wave.
I was just going to ask you about that. Yes. I mean, and they're now saying that the second wave could be far worse because it could occur in the fall when people have relaxed their social distancing and any kind of amelioration of contact, and think, oh, fine, it's all over, life back to normal, and it could be combined with the regular flu flu strains that we don't have vaccines for, and could be double deadly. So that's absolutely terrifying. You think that that's likely, possibly even sooner if people relax from keeping a close eye on it and observing quarantine.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, it appears that different parts of the world are going through this curve at different points in time. Uh-huh. So I, for example, I think we're a few weeks behind Italy and maybe a few months behind China. Yeah. So this second wave can happen for each community at a different time. For us, maybe it will coincide with fall. I mean, hopefully it won't happen, but if it does, maybe it will be then or earlier. But I think for some other communities, it might happen even earlier.
Yeah. What could be done, in your estimate, as a medical professional, as a physician, to avoid that? Just continuing the lockdown, continuing the social distancing, continuing, maybe even escalating it somehow?
That's a great question. I think for sake of full disclosure, I don't have an formal education in public health, but I think in retrospect, if the whole world was able to go on a simultaneous lockdown, I don't know, 2 months ago, maybe we would be in a different situation. I think if there is any kind of, in parts of the world where there is, seems to be seems that they have passed the apex of the curve. And if they were thinking about any kind of reopening, it just should be very gradual and very calculated. Yeah. With like businesses or activities that have least possible impact, and especially the most that would lend themselves more easily to being monitored and controlled. So, for example, let's say if you want to open your medical clinic again and see patients again, you would do it at like a fifth of the capacity, so that there is not even 5 people in your waiting room sitting next to each other. Yeah. Activities that you can intelligently space out and control the flow of people in and out.
Yeah. 2 more questions, if I can presume, on this is your break, your break from the front lines, and here we are taking up energy from you. But two things. What's been the worst for you personally?
Personally, for me, the worst part is putting my family into the anxiety of knowing that that's what I'm doing. So, my husband, my sister, my mother, my in-law, it's like going to war every day. You go and then come back, and then you have to go tomorrow again. So it doesn't get better for them. So that is what personally was, is difficult for me. I mean, I try to reassure them, and I'm obviously very careful and but still, they worry all the time, and I know that.
Of course, and you worry about them worrying, and you worry about bringing home death, and it's an amazing balancing act that you go through. It's extraordinary, and in that context, I want to ask you about this. Is how I first remembered that I knew you superficially, but I did know you. But I remembered because I saw the video that you made of when you were releasing a patient who was in his 90s, I think, and who had been saved. And we see so many videos of anguish and exhaustion. And despair, and this was a group of a couple, maybe a man or two, but a couple, mostly women, dancing to Empire State of Mind, Alicia Keys' version, and it was nurses and doctors and nurses' aides and all the medical personnel on the floor dancing and applauding as this little old person was wheeled out alive, and it was a saving moment. Tell me how that came to be made.
So I think a number of hospitals are doing this, and it's a great idea because you can imagine how morale can be really low.
God, yes.
Usually when you're in the hospital, there's always some sort of an alert about something bad that is happening somewhere, and you need to rush to get there to do something.
Right.
So when you're sitting and you hear the loudspeaker come on, you kind of brace yourself. You're like, oh my God, here's another one, and here's another one.
Somebody's coding.
Yeah, exactly. That's usually the scenario. So a number of hospitals starting having these kind of, like, we call them happy codes instead of the regular code, which is great because several times a day, you get a happy tune coming into you from the loudspeaker system instead of the usual negative stuff. So we were that day we were discharging this lovely elderly patient. So we all gathered together in the hallway, and I started taking a video. Everybody was dancing, and you're absolutely right. Actually, the group of people who are standing behind me, they are all women. Mm-hmm. Maybe there was a couple of the gentlemen nurses on the other side, but they were all women.
Yeah.
So it was wonderful. It was very joyous. And, even if it's for a few minutes, you kind of like get your, little energy boost, and then you go back.
Well, I was so moved. I burst into tears because it was people daring to talk about the audacity of hope, daring to celebrate their skills and the indefatigable resolve to save lives, and just demanding a moment of joy and celebration, even in the middle of horror. And it was we have learned that we have to celebrate small victories.
Yes. To be able to continue going.
Yes, well, to save a life is not a small victory.
Oh, yes.
It's a huge one, Vafa. Thank you for everything that you do all the time, on every shift you work, and even in so-called normal times. This is another new abnormal, but especially during this time. And we are incredibly grateful, not only when we applaud at 7:00 at night across New York City and I think now the country, but some of us are not going to let this drop when the situation has abated. This is a chance to really reset our priorities in this country and the world, and that's what we're going to somehow manage to do. So thank you, deep gratitude, and thank you for being with us on Women's Media Center Live as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. It was wonderful talking to you.
And it's time for our last break, and then for some fighting words.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, it's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Talk radio with a brain.
Words of warning. can be fighting words. According to the group Reporters Without Borders, the government of Turkmenistan has forbidden state-controlled media from writing or uttering the word coronavirus and has ordered the word removed from health brochures distributed at hospitals, schools, and workplaces. In Hungary, Prime Minister Viktor Orbán can now rule by absolute decree. His emergency measures are suspending existing laws, reserving sole power to end the emergency to Orbán, whose government has moved to persecute journalists and members of the opposition. The new law will permanently limit freedom of expression and will suspend all elections and referendums. Egypt's strongman General El-Sisi deployed chemical warfare troops in protective suits armed with disinfectant to the streets of Cairo in a theatrical display of military muscle. Vladimir Putin initially claimed that Russia had no cases of COVID-19, then blamed the escalating number of cases on, quote, jet-setting Russians who dared travel abroad, and finally shifted into saying that all the Russian COVID-19 cases were completely under control. Chile has stationed the military in all public squares to discourage further protests about the government having mismanaged the pandemic. Bolivia has postponed elections. Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu has closed the courts, conveniently delaying his own scheduled appearance to face criminal corruption charges. He has also authorized Israel's Internal Security Agency to track citizens using cell phone data developed for counterterrorism, to track people disobeying isolation orders, who can now be punished with up to 6 months in prison. Singapore's health ministry has posted information online about every coronavirus patient, sometimes in great detail, with absolutely no regard to patients' privacy rights. The Philippine Congress has passed legislation giving President Rodrigo Duterte emergency powers tantamount to autocracy. Thailand's Prime Minister has assumed the authority to censor news media. Subsequently, journalists have been harassed and sued for criticizing the government's response to the outbreak. The British Parliament, the mother of all parliaments, rushed through a bill giving government ministers the power to detain and isolate people indefinitely, to ban public gatherings, including protests, and to shut down ports and airports, all with little oversight. The bill's additional draconian elements, like sweeping powers granted to border agents and police, leading to indefinite detention and to hostile policies against immigrants, all these got the new law nicknamed the Henry VIII powers. Look, it should be obvious that in such extraordinary times as these, extraordinary measures must be at least considered, including examining border closings, quarantine enforcements, and tracking infected people, even at some risk of privacy violations. Many such actions are already protected by international law in such an emergency. But some governments are using the pandemic as a cover in order to seize new powers that have little or nothing to do with the outbreak, and to do so with few safeguards to ensure that this new authority won't be abused. Here in the United States, Trump's odious Attorney General Bill Barr has had the Justice Department ask Congress for sweeping new powers, including a plan to eliminate legal protections for asylum seekers, and, pause here for alert sirens, a plan for powers to detain people indefinitely without trial. Both Democrats and Republicans were so indignant at that the department scaled back and submitted a more modest proposal. But in the meantime, individual states are acting abusively in some cases. Governor Greg Abbott of Texas has blocked most abortions in the state during the pandemic, citing the procedure is elective and, wait for it, can be delayed. Rights groups have noted that governments absorb more power when citizens are distracted. Historically, such distractions have certainly proved useful for the ascension of dictators. When fear is pulsing, people want, and they deserve, strong, caring, thoughtful, capable, efficient leadership. Instead, they often get leaders who aren't strong, but who are merely strongmen. Crises like the pandemic present a perfect excuse to seize power. This crisis is in fact organic, but such crises are often manufactured specifically for such a purpose. As one of many examples, the infamous Reichstag fire that helped precipitate the rise of the Nazi Party in Germany. Wannabe dictators never clarify end dates for emergency laws, although they keep assuring the populace that such laws are merely temporary. What we know from experience, though, is that such laws tend to outlive the crisis, like the Patriot Act here in the United States following the 9/11 attacks. An excellent information source for keeping up with developments on this subject is the International Center for Not-for-Profit Law, which also tracks new legislation and new decrees during the pandemic. That's the International Center for Not-for-Profit Law. Which brings us to a red alert priority, the United States elections this year. They're already endangered by foreign interference, online hacking, faulty voting machines, lax procedures, Byzantine complications at polling places, voter suppression campaigns, and now the pandemic. We must understand that Trump will likely try to delay or even suspend the November presidential election, and the worse his own prospects continue to look, the more likely it is that he will want to do this, with the excuse being health safety for voters. No one should have to choose between their life and their vote, although I have to point out that African Americans have faced precisely that choice for centuries. This is why the option of voting by mail is so crucial. If your state does not offer this and other options, I urge you to contact the League of Women Voters for information and to start agitating and organizing to ensure that now. Do it yesterday. Do it quickly. Do it. Do it now. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter, and remember to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag Fighting Words. And that's our show for this week. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and now Instagram at The Robin Morgan, and you can check out my blog at robinmorgan.net and find my latest book of poems, Dark Matter, and my brand new novel, Parallax, wherever books are sold. Opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the Women's Media Center. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer of this program, Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us again next time on Women's Media Center Live.